she was getting really mad at me. And then at the end, she just said I was a communist. So
It's really a shame when an election can be so close with the person who is running as the Republican, right? But what I have to remind myself is it's not really about him. If it was a dog, the race would be close because it's about preserving an identity, a lifestyle, a way of being that there's people who really believe that they are the victims and they're losing out. And they've got to vote for the candidate who's going to preserve the American way. And we know what that is code for, you know. So it
Mm.
doesn't matter how esteemed, achieved, how much achievement the other candidate um, has done. It's not about that at all. And so I feel like this is a litmus test to show us once again that have we made any real progress?
Yeah.
I'd rather live in truth than, you know, we think that everything is better and it really isn't, you know.
Mm. Yeah, I was listening to something on NPR. They were interviewing this couple in Pennsylvania, I think, which is this big swing state. And they were like, it's not even about policy either. In the last debate, there was minimal talk about that too. They were just basically beefing at each other,
Mm-hmm.
throwing and deflecting insults. So I think I felt that too. Oh, it's at the end of the day, it's going to be more about the identity.
Hmm.
Um, because if I was in that position too, if I really, really thought, oh, okay, I'm really torn 50-50, even policy wise between two parties, I would probably go with the one that I identify most with, just on a personal level.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's what kind of makes it like we really don't know what's going to happen.
And I would just add this little controversial piece. I feel like even the liberal people who want to vote for the Democratic Party, the fact that there's this whole thing that they say that when people get behind the curtain, all of that zeal to do the right thing, kind of when it's time to pull the lever, metaphorically,
Hmm.
they can't do it. So that's what has happened in the past. So publicly, yes, yes, but then when it's time to vote for the first woman, person of color president to actually do that, we'll see.
Mm.
And then there's people in the brown and black community who are not enthusiastic, don't really feel like it's going to make a big difference for our community, feel like they've heard it all before. And what happened after Barack Obama, the President Barack Obama, the backlash. Oh, I'm not even, of course, I'm so removed, but that's that contingency to think about as well.
That made me think, Grace, about the time that you met.
Oh boy. Yeah. Fatima, I used to work at this restaurant, and in the restaurant, they had a big Confederate flag, first of all, hanging in there. And then, so the owners took a specific stance. So, because a lot of people were like, take down the flag, that's offensive. And then the owner stood her ground and made it a whole big deal in the press and stuff, saying like that represents a time where women gained rights. So why should she take it down? Um, and saying like, I'm considered a minority too, and like this, yeah, blah 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 blah. And then at the time when the Black Lives Matter movement was happening, there was a lot of like just rising tensions everywhere, but then also like in the restaurant even. And protesters started protesting around the restaurant. And then they started like smashing employees' cars and stuff. But we're like, you know, a lot of the employees are like minority people, and we're like, we just work here, man. Like, um, and there was this one girl that was a server there that we would just get into really heated debates like during our shifts. And these are like 16-hour shifts. So we'd go back and forth talking. And she was telling me why she supports Trump. And then we guys just got into like dope. I just spent time like exploring her psyche and just trying to get to understand her. And eventually it boiled down to her saying, like, I don't believe that racism is real.
Hmm.
But it was just interesting to me because she was like, she had a son. She's an older Black woman. And that just stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, what do you mean you don't believe racism is real? And then I was like, so you've never experienced discrimination or racism? Like, and she's like, no, I don't believe that I have. And then she was like, and I don't want to raise my son to believe that racism is real because I don't want him to be limited by that belief that he's different. So I'm like, okay, I can see why she's like living with that mentality, but I feel like there's a difference between just like I feel like she was just walking blind. That's just being willfully ignorant at that point. Although I understand why she was holding on to that.
Yeah. Well, that to me, Grace, is just like when other people say, and they're not a minority, that they've experienced racism, because racism is a systemic oppression. And so if you are not a part of the dominant culture, then you cannot be someone, you can be prejudiced, you can discriminate, but you can't be racist because racist is a system. So that's that willful ignorance that you're talking about. People don't understand that there are laws and um, mindsets that keep certain people in place. The caste system, really, right? So,
Yeah.
which is a great book to read to understand why racism does exist, proves that it does exist, and why people of color can't be racist. And that's a book called Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. It's excellent.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that. She also made an interesting point. I think her main point centered around she felt really strongly that minority groups, and then especially like she felt like the like her community, the Black community, like often fell into a victim mentality. And so she was expressing that frustration to me. And she was like, I refuse to be a part of that narrative. Um, so that whole experience was just interesting. It was a very like open dialogue of us trying to understand each other. Well, I was trying to understand her. She was getting really mad at me. And then at the end, she just said I was a communist. So
And that was that,
and that
as
was
Liz
that.
would say.
But and then throughout it, because we would be like going at it for like 5 hours, right? Because we're like serving people and then we're like chatting and stuff. And then some of the other Black workers like who worked in the kitchen like pulled me to the side and they're like, you need to stop talking to her. Like they're like there's this conversation is not productive. And then I was like, well, I'm just trying to understand her. And then they're like, we don't claim her. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh,
I don't know. It got a little dicey there.
I was just gonna say that's the whole point, and why I said being here, I'm not trying to get into any kind of process of change, because even getting to a common definition is very dicey for
Mm,
all involved. So the people of color naming
Mm-hmm.
what's going on, defining it might be totally different, or their approach is different. And a lot of times, because of the outside pressure, what happens is you end up being hung out to dry on your own because people start to kind of like back away, even allies, you know. So it's power dynamic is real, you
hmm.
know.
Yeah, especially when nobody's willing to like acknowledge it or it's just like the silent system that runs, then
Mm-hmm.
it's really difficult to even have like open discourse about it because
Mm-hmm.
everyone's just feeling it, but everyone's a part of that system too.